Thanks for the introduction. Yeah, as I say, my name's James, and I'm a creative director at OMSE. And for those who aren't familiar with what our name means, essentially it means like-minded. And that's quite a good sort of metaphor, I guess, for kind of how we've grown over the years and how we got to where we are. So we've worked with many like-minded designers, artists, illustrators, photographers. I mean, there's too many here to mention, but it's kind of all led up to the point where we've been able to create simple, striking brands. And we believe whether you're a household name or a future visionary, we can help you have impact in the world around you. And we work across quite a few different sectors. Yeah, everything from actually even working on identities for other agencies through to sexual wellness. So quite a spectrum. But today, I'm going to be talking about one project in particular, and that is called ARC. It's now, sorry. There we go. So that's called ARC. Oh, I've jumped ahead. 1 second. So I'm just going to give a little bit more context on ARC before we kind of move forward. So they're a co-living space in Wembley. And I'm not sure if any of you have come across this type of business before, but think of it a bit like sort of like an adult version of student accommodation. So you have your own sort of apartment, but then you have shared facilities such as the kitchen, lounge, and gym. And these were just some videos that we took to see the site before it was actually renovated and we did the work. They kind of took over this sort of hotel that unfortunately wasn't being used. And when they approached us, they were looking for help with 4 things. So strategy, the name, visual identity, and then like a campaign. And so that's going to kind of be the crux of what I talk about today. We always kind of start with strategy, so I'm going to start there. And the question that we always ask ourselves when we kick off is, why do we exist? It's a really hard question to answer, but essentially what we're trying to find out about any business that we brand or we work with is, what's our purpose? And what makes us special? And to help us figure this out, we kind of have lots of in-depth strategy phases. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but this gives you like a quick sort of preview from one of those first phases. Essentially, what we're trying to figure out is like, what's the brand idea, the experience principles, and then how that could come to life through tone of voice, the visual identity, and brand architecture. And so off the back of this phase for ARC, it led us to create this brand promise. And so I'm just going to read this out, but essentially, ARC was defined as: we build homely co-living spaces in vibrant areas where people can work comfortably, connect easily, and live all together better. And if we're to summarize that, it kind of shortens to our brand idea, which is all together better. And that kind of refers to the fact that you have everything in one. And it's also kind of going beyond that too. But again, I'm not going to go into too much more detail about the strategy side. I'm going to jump actually straight into naming. So with the strategy phase done, this kind of gives us like a really solid base. And we don't always do naming. It's kind of something that it's kind of on a project to project dependent. But once we've kind of got the sort of strategy down, without getting too deep into the theory of things, there's some key things we kind of start to think about before we start coming up with names. So I'm not sure if this resonates or if people have kind of come across this before, but we look at what's the semantic structure of the name. So like, does it convey the right idea or the attitude? What's the strategic impact? So like, does what we're putting forward suggest with the business objectives? What's the phonetic structure? So is it easy to say? And is it ownable? Like, could we actually get a domain? Could we trademark this name? And off the back of these principles, we then come up with our own sort of own objectives for the name. And every naming project is unique. For ARC, we knew that the name had to be flexible. It had to be something that could sit together with new locations or sit alone. It needed to be simple and it needed to be ownable. So with those sort of objectives and principles in mind, we jump into kind of a massive naming phase. And again, I'm not going to run through all the names we suggested, but with each one, we'll look at, availability and whether it's ticking off those boxes. We also kind of come up with buckets or themes, which we use as jumping off points for each name. And these help us make sure that we're falling in love with a concept that we love for the name rather than getting too caught up on the name. Despite that, sometimes it doesn't work and you end up having to do another round. Sometimes you get lucky, but in this particular case, we ended up doing another round. And so we went more descriptive. We heightened the stakes. And so we added visuals to kind of really help build on the names that we were putting forward. We also thought about a story behind each name. So you're really buying into the concept, not just kind of, the name on a piece of paper. And through doing the second, more heightened version of our presentation, we were able to kind of come to the name ARC. Though worth noting, it was in our appendix. So you just never know with naming. And that's a good name is one that's not taken. So moving forward on to the visual identity. So this is probably going to be where I spend the kind of bulk of this talk, the visual identity part. So when we kind of work on this, we tend to have three phases: concept development, design development, and delivery. I've decided to kind of pick out the concept development presentation because for us, or we always feel like that's the most exciting because that's when you see the ideas come to life. And then I'll obviously continue to build and show you how we kind of developed it. But this is the presentation that we showed to the client. There's no edits here. So I'm just going to kind of run through it now. So we always start by kind of having this little bit where we just explain that the presentation is going to look at our brand idea, which we defined in the strategy phase, and how it can be applied to two concepts. We then look at different touch points to see how it could be brought to life. And all the work that we did before in the strategy phase is kind of simplified to this brand idea. So altogether better is kind of what we're trying to bring to life through these different concepts. And the strategy can be visualized in a literal way, or it could be a creative idea as implied by the strategy. We tend to kind of go more creative idea route, but to be honest, again, it just depends on projects. So again, I feel like there's a lag. 1 second. Okay, so concept one, we called this Let's Build an Arc. And ARC is essentially like a vessel that offers safety and protection for everyone. And we love that we could draw parallels between this definition and our core offering. We thought there was something really nice in supporting our members and also the community to kind of live all together better. ARC also ended up being the name of the brand, so we thought it was the perfect visual cue to support a wide variety of communication, both fixed and flexible. So let's build an arc. We try to be really literal. So as you can kind of see here, we've got a picture of an arc, and when you reduce it to its simplest form, it becomes a half semicircle. And that half semicircle is really, really useful when simplified because we can kind of subtly reference the shape of things in different ways. So it could be like our logo, could be shaped like an arc. We could also, again, they were talking about having more locations than Webley. So could the mark change to represent the personality of different locations? For example, it could be something really descriptive, or it could kind of be something a bit more bulky, like they were talking about opening up a Peckham location. Or could we go something that's a little bit more football and styled? So this first location was in Wembley, so should we go with something that feels very football, something that feels like Wembley Stadium? We then had just kind of keep running through it. So we have like a headline typeface to support this. But yeah, this is kind of a little bit more brand architecture to a degree. We're just trying to figure out what makes sense for the brand. Do they each have their own version of an arc to reflect the different areas? Or do we just have a core one? So it's kind of more of an open discussion. But then we move forward into kind of how do you apply the brand? And for this route, the system was quite simple. You use an arc. So you could kind of have it sort of like holding content as a graphic design device on the bottom. You could have type filling the arc, and you could use that with the sort of arc device, or you could just have type forming an arc. And then you can kind of see, as we start to apply some of the graphics, how that starts to feel. And I guess what we're trying to get to here is how can we create a brand that feels very branded without the logo getting in the way, or without, we want to focus on the communication side of things. So how can we do that? We knew that they were going to have partnerships within the building. So when they had food delivery, how would they show up with Deliveroo? And then if they had Peloton sessions in the gym, how could we kind of, again, give the brand or the feeling our sort of own twist? We weren't sure if this was necessary at this point, but we were just exploring as well, how could it be applied in other ways? So were there sub-brands such as the gym? Again, lots of great arc shapes in the court for a gym. So that was kind of where we got to with that. And then what we do is we just run through more examples of how it could be applied. So when you check in, what would that look like? If you're getting a welcome pack from different locations, how would that change? Maybe there's an opportunity to kind of brand more of the interiors. I think something with this particular project that we were conscious of is it's your home. So we were looking for opportunities to brand it in a way that felt unbranded. So if you knew, you knew, but if you didn't, you didn't. So again, you could picture like the mats being arc-shaped. Maybe there's different sort of handles or fixtures for the meeting rooms that we could kind of sort of brand in an arc form. Or maybe it's a recording studio. We were kind of also thinking about like, maybe there's ways to do signage. I mean, this is not subtle at all. This is very, very loud. But again, just kind of showing all the different ways and we could start to think about it. I mean, it could also just be something super simple like an A board. And this could be talking to some of the things that they have throughout the week. So bike repair, gardening, cooking, that sort of thing. Or maybe there's a Christmas market. Again, this is super, super subtle. Some people might argue it's not really an arc, but could we have our own coffee cups where it's, again, really subtly referenced? So more of a like Soho home or monocle shop vibe. And then lastly, just more exploration in terms of how we could subtly apply an arc. And again, if you know, you know, or resident-led events. And then again, more examples, but if they had a chef's residency, how that could kind of come to life. And then advertising. So I think through doing all this in this first route, we felt like we had quite a strong system. We really do like to push the idea in these initial kind of concepts, because we've definitely found ourselves in situations where if we haven't stress tested it, then we get stuck in the next phase. And then just, I think this is the last app in this first part, but just an example of how the website could kind of come to life. And so all of that, if we're kind of looking back, gives us like a really solid base for the first route. So we have this arc logo that can kind of change to reflect different locations. If we decide to kind of build on the brand, we can create sub-brands that kind of are a little bit more expressive. We started to think about colors and what our typefaces could be for each location. We have this really simple but solid system that references an arc, and it can kind of like come to life in layouts, but also through typography. And then we can start to think about illustration and photography as well, and how that sort of plays into the system. And that's kind of like a summary. So that was the first route, which is what got picked. But I want to show the second route as well, because I think, again, it's just really interesting to see how different ideas can be applied. And so while this one was all about the arc supporting the community and kind of very focused on sort of, in a way, the building being this sort of place of refuge, the second one was more about the community or the people within the building. So we call this one a room full of character. So we believe that people make a place, and our buildings are the arcs that support them. We celebrate our members' unique and different personalities, because arc is a place where everyone can be themselves. It's a place where everyone can write significant chapters in their own personal stories. And because storytelling is so important, we want to build a brand that celebrates these different stories and characters. So we had this crew of characters made from characters to reference the sort of like the different community at ARC. We thought that an identity made with characters for characters from all walks of life was quite cool, and we could use the system in a way that allowed us to tell these stories in a really elegant and unique way. So a bit like the first route, we're kind of starting to think about how do we apply it. So if it's all about characters, obviously we can kind of write words with them. Perhaps we can think about drawing things with words to kind of help describe stuff. Maybe there's other ways we can start to kind of sweat the words. And again, we have these sort of iconography. And then when you see it sort of applied, it gives you a sense of how it could all come to life. Our logo incorporates this asterisk, and we thought that that was kind of like a nice way to sort of link back to the system, but also link to different things that we were talking about. So it could be that ARC is a home for creativity, and there's lots of different things we could say with it. Or perhaps like the asterisk is a way to highlight the different locations. So ARC, by the way, this is the Peckham one, the Shoreditch one, that sort of thing. I thought there was also an opportunity to kind of give each location a different identity, and this could be like a different typeface using the different glyphs. The system's super easy to kind of support different offers. So here you can kind of see the logo sort of referencing Deliveroo. And again, maybe the type system gives a bit more of a pattern to kind of explore things. There's also the Peloton example. So again, with both routes, we try to kind of show the same example, so you have a like-for-like comparison. If we're in this world, maybe we would create like a bike or an icon out of the glyphs. Or we can also be quite stripped back with it, and it could just quite literally be a reference to Peloton. There's an opportunity, again, as well, to kind of create sub-brands if we think that that makes sense. And then we start to show examples of how it all comes to life. So maybe outside the building, there's like a walkway of these characters kind of leading you in. Your sort of welcome card or check-in card. Signage could quite literally also just be building on these glyphs in different ways. And it's a nice way to kind of nod to the characters again. We could have our own version of the doormats. And again, I think with the signage stuff, we felt like just really use the typeface. It could be really simple and beautiful and humorous. Or we can obviously use the iconography to kind of sort of signify the different spaces. Sweat towel, that sort of thing. And then if we were to kind of do Christmas market, maybe we could have our own sort of like mugs. Maybe we could have jewelry that kind of builds on the characters of the personalities of the characters. Maybe we could even have merch. And then, yeah, how does that come together in advertising as well? So off the back of showing these two concepts, whoops, there's the there's the kind of website that kind of brings it all together as well. I still really like this route. I think had it got picked, definitely we could have like pushed it forward and yeah, enhanced it. But yeah, here again is the summary. So we have like arc with an asterisk that links to different things relevant to each person staying in arc. We have the different locations, our colors, typeface, sub-brands, how it can be applied in system, iconography, and photography. And that's the last summary. So that kind of was the concept presentation, and the client took some time to kind of think about it before we moved into design development. And what they decided is they wanted to go with the route that was an arc. So just kind of recapping on that, they felt that this just really communicated the concept really clearly, and it was easy to understand and apply. And they were really excited about how, yeah, it didn't feel overly branded, but there was an opportunity to dial it up. They did feel, though, that we needed one logo that captured the essence and personality of ARC to work at all locations rather than have each location having its own custom mark. And so that led us to adding a phase. We don't always do this, but it just depends on where we're at in the concepts and what's required. And for this particular project, we had to add a phase, which we call design iteration. This is kind of like the nerdy design stuff. So we looked at how we could create an arc with type, looking at traditional sans serifs, through to condensed sans serifs, through to serifs, through to something more organic. And on the one hand, you've got something that feels really simple, and then on the other hand, you've got something really expressive. And then what we do is we kind of take our favorite marks and we start to stress test them. Sometimes that might be showing the mark alongside other brands in the space, but actually because co-living was a relatively new sector, it felt better to kind of test it out in different ways. So we just kind of took some of the core apps that we saw before in the previous presentation and looked how they could be applied and what that might mean for our supporting typeface. In the end, they chose the one that kind of had a really nice symmetry to it. And again, it felt like the clearest sort of communication or version of an arc. What's cool, though, is that some of these other arcs came back into play later on. But that said, there is this sort of core mark. I'm not going to get into kind of all the tweaking, the nerdy stuff, but like if we look back between that one and that one, there were many versions that kind of got us to here. And then we moved on to design development. Again, unfortunately, I don't have time to run through all of this today, but essentially what we do here was really stress test the idea. We keep pushing on the elements. We keep looking at other ways that we could apply the brand. You can even see some outdoor furniture there. So we kind of really keep pushing it. And then we move on to delivery. And delivery is kind of, again, I don't have time to kind of run through the whole thing, but delivery is different to guidelines. We call them a delivery document. And the reason we do that is because we haven't really had time to kind of properly stress test all of the things that we're suggesting. I think that unless we've made them for real, it's really hard to kind of guideline. And so we see this more as a document for inspiration, more of a do's rather than a don'ts. And it's also where we link to all the assets. So in the past, before we did delivery documents, we just had a never-ending stream of emails asking for assets. But if it's all linked in one document, we use Dropbox. Even as the document shared along, it means that everyone can get access to what they need. So then for this one, we worked on a campaign to follow before we kind of wrapped everything up. And that included art direction, a shoot plan, and casting. These are all presentations in themselves. So again, I don't have time to kind of run through them, but the goal was to kind of do a shoot with models in 5 sort of areas or scenes that reflected the vibe of what it would be like to live at Wembley Arc. And so we thought we could capture something around breakfast, something around in the lobby, something in and around Wembley, lunch, and a party scene. And we actually worked with both a photographer and a videographer on the day. We had lots of, we had 4 or 5 models who came through. And again, I'm just going to flick through some of the images. These are just some of them, not all of them. But again, showing that breakfast scene, then in and around Wembley, and then moving into the sort of party scene. We also, yeah, had a couple of social cut edits. So this is just one of them, but there was a number of them that they then used to kind of promote the brand as it launched. But they're quite sort of zippy, fun, fast-moving cuts. And then lastly, it was a bit of a last-minute idea, but we thought it would be good, well, it'd be great to kind of give each of the models disposable cameras so they could shoot each other during the day. And that really actually led to some great content because it just felt so much more real when it was being held by someone within the group rather than the photographer coming in. So the end result, I mean, I'm sure most of you have seen it, but I will just kind of quickly run through it. Where we got to was we have this flexible system that supports all the different ways in which art can be enjoyed. And the semi-circular form is really great because it can be used in so many different ways. And it's always subtle. So it always feels like home, like never overly branded. And again, like here's another example for the website, but actually you can see even probably from one of those first sketches we showed in the concept dev, we can reference arcs through a layout in a couple of different ways. We can also do it with signage and really play up this arc idea in physical form. So whether it's something outdoors or notice board inside, there's just subtle ways that we can kind of bring it to life. And then when you when you kind of join, getting a sort of room key, again, even like the thumb gap, super subtle, but again, builds on this, this brand idea. And then lastly, what's great again is like that it can stretch. So as they start to think about those other locations, yes, we'll have like a consistent mark for arc, but then there might be expressions that kind of feel more branded to the location. And again, I think it's really, really important at this point just to kind of note that there's an incredible amount of work that goes into this, and it's all boiled down to what you see on Instagram or our website, which might be only 10 slides, but it really does take an army. And for this project, yeah, we had designers, photographers, artists, illustrators, again, all kind of playing a big part. Actually, one of our designers actually also modeled in the campaign, which was fun. But yeah, that kind of gives you a summary of what we did for ARC.